Next up, Cheryl Mack is Head of Community at Stone & Chalk. Last time she was here, we asked her to name her favourite pitch deck and she said Fyre Fest. The now infamous music festival on an island raised $36 million from investors, but was a disaster and led to its founder being jailed for 6 years. So how good was that deck? That was a lot of money to raise. Cheryl is here to actually take us through it. Cheryl, welcome back into Startup Daily.
Thank you very much for having me. I did not think that comment would lead to this, but I'm excited to go through it.
I think, as I said, because we put the analysis up on Startup Daily yesterday, and I sort of said the last time you were on the show, we joked about it. And then we came up with the idea for the pitch doctor. And so we put it up yesterday and we put a call out. We've already got our first pitch deck in from a founder, so we'll have you look at that in a short time. But let's do our first one, the Fyre Festival. Take us through this whole pitch deck and why it worked. Because he got 26 million US dollars out of investors to put this whole thing on. Burnt most of it, got the execution horribly wrong. But as you point out, and it's on the Startup Daily website if viewers want to have a look at it, it was a pretty awesome deck.
It was a great deck. And as I said in the article, there is actually a lot that we can learn from the deck itself, even though the execution, was not great. I think some of the things that I saw in that deck that were quite well done particularly was around their ability to craft a very simple message in a really strong way. So they were very clear about who the buyer was and who the other buyer was, so it was a marketplace, who it was for, how they would make money, and what the value prop was. So they said it's for talent to connect with people who want to buy talent. Great market, right?
Yeah.
And they also used imagery quite well. That feeling of FOMO everyone talks about, the fear of missing out? They absolutely nailed that, both with their audience but also with their investors. And so the sense of emotion that they created within that deck, and I imagine while Billy McFarlane was pitching it, just was so strong.
I think one of the other points that you made too was that the use of influencers and the fact that they kind of got this whole shall we say, cosmos of people around it that made it sound so impressive, And there were names like Blink 182 who was coming along, and it had so much cred surrounding it that you thought, gee, who wouldn't want to be a part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. The social proof was just outstanding. Possibly the best social proof I've ever seen. They had hundreds of influencers, but they also had brands, and then they also had the bands. So you've got all of these different, social proof things coming together to say this is a valid thing. And that concept and that strategy in and of itself is a fantastic strategy. You want to show in your pitch deck that you have social proof, that you have people outside your organization that are vouching for you. See, they had the press. They had all these brands. They had literally in their pitch deck, they've got 3 pages of influencers, which arguably is unnecessary. But that social proof was there.
And when you look at that list there, look, there's Vogue, there's Cosmo, there's Esquire, Bazaar, even Fox News. I can just imagine a whole bunch of Fox News hosts on that island for that festival. But what an incredible roundup where you just go, this has got cred. And I suppose that was part of their media strategy along the way.
And I think when you look at that too, the slide before I think was showing just how much imagery was used. Is that a good ratio? It seems that the imagery far outweighed the text. You were talking before that they had quite a targeted and simple message. Is that the key?
Yeah, I think absolutely making sure that you have a targeted and simple message is key. That messaging is that imagery that they've included there. It's something that you want to use sparingly and use for a purpose. So don't just throw lots of images in there for the sake of throwing lots of images in there, but if there is a message you want to get across, and again, creating that sense of FOMO is really important, particularly if it's a consumer brand.
I think the biggest mistake is that founders make.
I think the biggest mistake that founders make is including way too much text or not including enough. So sometimes I'll see a slide deck that has basically the entire slide just filled with text. And then other times I'll see one that just has a single pie chart and no context. So using the right amount of copy or text to provide the right context, but also to not overwhelm people and make them read quite a lot, because people don't like reading, is probably the best thing. I also see a lot of mistakes. And that baffles me, like spelling or grammar or like double words. It's like, this is something that goes out to millions, or well, for Fyre Fest it was millions.
Yeah.
Like,
and there were spelling mistakes on the Fyre Fest.
Yeah.
Pressure.
I was like, Billy McFarlane, come on, you probably could have proofread that.
Yeah. And I'm sort of really interested because when we were looking at that Fyre Fest, going back to the words and the text, it's making them work together so they tell a bigger story. And so if you had the images just all looking nice without the words to give them the context, it wouldn't have had the same impact, would it?
No, not at all. One of the things that they did really well was they had this huge, like, full screen image that was very powerful of like a girl dancing with fire or something, and then it just had a couple of lines around like, this is what we plan to do. So they were very clear about their plan, which was actually something that I say was something that you should really do. They were clear. They were like, this is what we've achieved so far, this is what we plan to do in the next 3 years, and in fact this is what we're going to do in year 1. Now, of course, they didn't execute that properly, but being clear about your roadmap and your plans is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, it all went a bit wrong from day one, let alone year one. But the other thing that you pointed out in the pitch deck was vague diagrams. It's a problem.
Yeah.
Sort of, there was this kind of weird, sort of wiggly. It kind of looked like you should fill in the lines to actually get to the piece of cheese at the end.
Yeah.
Here it is.
There
I mean,
it is.
what, you know?
What is this? Like, ideate, conceptualize, execute. Like, no. Things like this, these vague diagrams, do not add anything to a pitch deck. Please do not include them. If you need to include a diagram, make sure it makes sense. It contributes to the story.
It kind of needed a steaming pile of caca at the very bottom, probably at the execute part. But, you know,
Yes.
that's another story.
And to flip this round, from an investor point of view, do you think this was also a massive lesson to investors to say, okay, hang on, we can't make any major decision based on a great pitch deck. There's a serious amount of due diligence that has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to say anything negative about the investors that invested in Fyre Fest and Billy McFarlane. I think the documentaries does go into that,
Yeah.
and I do assume that they did their DD. So no, of course, no investor just invests off a pitch deck, and I assume that they didn't. But at the same time, I think what is a bigger lesson to learn is around buying into the hype. So, his pitch deck was the tool that created the hype that allowed him to go out there and just create this huge momentum. And a lot of people just bought into the hype. They just, ran with it. And so that's the lesson I think we can take from this.
And I think that's something that also comes out in the documentary. Billy is an incredibly charismatic man who, even at the very end, even as the walls were crashing in on everyone, he was still convincing people he could get it across the line, which is one of those powers that great founders have, and that belief that they have that somehow, even when it gets really dark, they can still pull it out of the fire. In this particular instance,
Yes.
it's one of those things. It's fascinating.
It's a fantastic quality in founders, and investors do look for that. They look for that quality of perseverance, of determination, of how are you going to get through when the world throws everything at you. The answer is just simply don't commit fraud.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Steve Bannon knows that now too. Anyway, Cheryl, it's great to have you in. Our pitch doctor, we're so thrilled that you're on board with Startup Daily as the pitch doctor. We've already got our first pitch in from someone who read the story yesterday. So you're going to have a look at that, and we'll get the next one up and we'll get you back in to talk about it too. This is a really exciting project, and I think it's such a great thing for founders and for everyone to learn from. Thanks for your time and thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Cheryl. I can't wait for the next one.